Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Abby Pick and I'm one of the assessment consultants at Pearson Clinical Assessment. And today I'm going to be talking through the Beck range of assessments. So first I'll be looking at the general overview of the range of assessments and then looking at the individual inventory scales and possible links to other measures, and then the different administration options available, and finally scoring and reporting. So the range of assessments that I'll be talking about are the Beck Youth Inventory 2, the Beck Depression Inventory 2, Beck Depression Inventory Fast Screen, Beck Anxiety Inventory, Beck Hopelessness Scale, and then the Beck Scale for Suicide Ideation. So the Beck range of assessments covers a variety of ages, where the Beck Youth Inventory is aimed at the lower age ranges. So this is from 7 to 18 years old. And the other Beck assessments are mainly for people aged 17 and above. However, the Beck Depression Inventory 2, including the fast screen version, can be used from 13 years, but I'm going to go through each of these scales individually. So I'll first go through the Beck Youth Inventory 2. So this allows you to assess children and adolescents' emotional and social impairment and help to plan effective interventions. So there are 5 self-report inventories within the Beck Youth Inventory, and these can be used together or separately, depending on what it is that you'd like to assess. And I'll speak a little bit more about this in more detail on the next slide. So it's for ages 7 to 18 years old and can be administered in pen and paper format, or it can be administered and scored on our online platform Q Global. So each inventory contains 20 statements where you rate how frequently the statement has been true, looking at thoughts, feelings, and behaviours associated with emotional and social impairment in youth. Each inventory takes between 5 to 10 minutes to complete and requires a CL2R qualification code. So as mentioned, there are 5 different scales, and these can be administered individually, or there's also a combination booklet which includes all 5. So here are the 5 scales. So there's the Beck Depression Inventory for Youth, and this includes items that reflects the respondent's negative thoughts about himself or herself, his or her life and future, feelings of sadness, and physiological indications of depression. So an example of this is, I feel like no one loves me and I feel empty inside. The Beck Anxiety Inventory for Youth includes items reflecting fears, for example, about school, getting hurt, or their health. It also includes items reflecting worrying, for example, I am afraid that I might make mistakes, and physiological symptoms associated with anxiety, such as my hands shake. The Beck Anger Inventory for Youth includes items or perceptions of mistreatment, negative thoughts about others, feelings of anger, and physiological arousal. And examples of these are, when I get mad, I stay mad, or I think my life is unfair. The Beck Disruptive Behaviour for Youth includes items related to behaviours and attitudes associated with conduct disorder and defiant behaviour. For example, I like to hurt animals, and I like it when people are scared of me. And finally, the Beck Self-Concept Inventory, which includes items that explore self-perceptions, such as competence and positive self-worth. For example, I feel proud of the things that I do, and I'm happy to be me. So as mentioned before, it takes around 5 minutes per inventory, and this is dependent on the youth's age, their reading ability, and mental status. So in some instances, it might be necessary to read the inventories to the child, and particularly with 7-year-olds, make sure that they can read all of the items or be able to ask for clarification if they need it. The Beck Youth Inventory is a brief and easy to administer assessment, and they have fewer items than most other measures. So although they have fewer items, it doesn't sacrifice reliability and validity. So the Beck Youth Inventory can be used in conjunction with other measures to gather an overall picture of the child or adolescent's social and emotional behaviour. And it allows insight into why they might be experiencing difficulties within the school environment. So here is a list of the other measures which can provide a more comprehensive view. So this can be used together with resiliency scales, bully victimisation scales, self-image profiles, adaptive behaviour scales, executive function attention scales, Asperger's disorder scales, and autism rating scales. So now on to the Beck Depression Inventory 2. So the Beck Depression Inventory 2 is the world's most widely used instrument detecting depression. So it is used to measure the severity of depression in adults and adolescents aged 13 to 80 years old. It can be administered either in pen and paper format or administered and scored on our online platform Q Global. So it consists of 21 items to assess the intensity of depression in clinical and in normal populations and takes around 5 minutes to complete. Each item is a list of 4 statements arranged in increasing severity about a particular symptom of depression in relation to how they've been feeling over the past 2 weeks. So they answer by selecting the statement number, which goes from 0 to 3, and this one requires a CL2 qualification code. The Beck Depression Inventory Fast Screen helps you quickly screen for depression in adolescents and adults with the purpose of reducing the number of false positives for depression in patients with known biological, medical, or alcohol substance abuse problems. The Beck Depression Inventory Fast Screen helps you quickly screen for depression in adolescents and adults with the purpose of reducing the number of false positives for depression in patients with known biological, medical, or alcohol substance abuse problems. It is aimed at those from 13 to 80 years old and is a 7-item self-report taking no longer than 5 minutes to complete. All of the items are extracted from the Beck Depression Inventory 2 and measures the severity of depression that correspond to the psychological, non-somatic criteria for diagnosing major depressive disorder as listed in the DSM-4. It's important to note that this is not a substitute for the Beck Depression Inventory 2, which has the full 21 items. But this is scored the same way, where the individual selects which statement best describes the way they've been feeling over the past 2 weeks, going from 0 to 3. This one is only to be administered in paper format and it requires a CL2 qualification code. The Beck Anxiety Inventory is the most widely used instrument for detecting anxiety, and it measures the severity of anxiety in adults and adolescents aged 17 and above. It evaluates both physiological and cognitive symptoms of anxiety, and importantly, item overlap with other self-report depression inventories is minimised. The Beck Anxiety Inventory has been found to discriminate well between anxious and non-anxious diagnostic groups, and as a result, it is useful for screening measure of anxiety in a variety of clinical populations. So the inventory can be administered in pen and paper format or online, again on Q Global. It consists of 21 items, and each item is a description of a symptom of anxiety and is rated on a scale of 0 to 3. So for example, a symptom of anxiety is unable to relax, and the response options are 0, so not at all, 1, mildly, 2, moderately, and 3, severely. And the higher the total score from the items indicates a more severe anxiety level. It takes around 5 to 10 minutes to complete and requires a CL2 qualification code. The Beck Hopelessness Scale helps you to measure 3 major aspects of hopelessness, which are feelings about the future, loss of motivation, and expectations. It's designed to measure an individual's attitude about their long-term future, and it also helps you to identify individuals who are at risk for suicide. So those who show moderate to severe levels of hopelessness should therefore be watched closely for suicide potential. It's for those aged 17 to 80 years old and consists of 20 true or false items. The statements describe the individual's attitude over the past week. For example, I will look forward to the future with hope and enthusiasm. Again, this can be administered via paper format or administered and scored on Q Global and takes around 10 minutes to complete. And again, it's a CL2 qualification code. And finally, the Beck scale for suicide ideation. So this is used by clinicians and it assesses the individual's thoughts, attitudes, and intentions based on the past week. It is a clinical rating instrument that helps you detect and measure the severity of suicide ideation in those 17 and above. And it's also useful for monitoring suicide ideations of patients who are known to be at risk. So it is a 21-item self-report instrument and takes around 5 to 10 minutes to be completed and can be administered in pen and paper format or on Q Global with a CL2 qualification code. So now on to the administration in a little bit more detail. As already mentioned, all of the Beck assessments are available to be administered in pen and paper format, and all of the assessments, except for the Beck Depression Inventory Fast Screen, are available for online administration and scoring on Q Global. And you have the option for manual entry for scoring, on-screen administration, or remote on-screen administration. So the pen and paper format is simply completing the self-report on the paper forms. This can then be hand scored, or the total score from the paper can be entered into Q Global and a report can be generated on there. If using Q Global for administering the self-reports, there's no paper forms that are required, so it's done completely online, and again with the option to generate a report on there. So manual entry is using your paper record forms and entering the scores from the paper forms into Q Global. On-screen administration is intended to be if you're sat next to someone, but you're using your computer instead of your paper record form, and this option automatically scores as you go along. Remote on-screen administration is where a secure link is sent via email to the person completing the self-report. They will then receive an email asking them to fill out the questionnaire, and they can do this in their own time on any web-enabled device. However, we don't recommend using mobile phones. Again, this will automatically score as they go along, and once it's completed, the examiner will receive an email to say that it's been completed, and they can then sign on to their Q Global account and generate a report on there. The scoring and reporting generated for the Beck Youth Inventory, the Beck Depression Inventory, the Beck Anxiety Inventory, and Beck Hopelessness Scale includes the raw scores, T-scores, which are plotted for you, the percentile ranks, and then a diagnostic range, for example, mild or moderate. For the Beck scale for suicide ideation, you just get a bar graph plotting the raw score for you. So the raw scores are obtained by adding the item scores together. So an example of this for the Beck Youth Inventory would be adding the 0 to 3 scores for all 20 items on each scale. T-scores are calculated using the means and standard deviations specific to a particular norm group by age and gender. So again, another example using the Beck Youth Inventory would be calculated against 7 to 10-year-olds, 11 to 14-year-olds, and then 15 to 18-year-olds. However, when these scores are not distributed normally, the T-scores alone might not reflect the frequency with which the score was obtained within that group. So the percentile ranks of the particular T-score indicates how many individuals within that norm group obtained that score or lower. And finally, the diagnostic range gives information to interpret the results in terms of the severity of levels of, for example, depression or anxiety or hopelessness. And all of the Beck assessments have a similar process for scoring, as you can see on screen. So with the majority of responses being scored using a scale from 0 to 3, with the Beck Hopelessness Scale, this is scored using true or false statement responses, and then the Beck Scale for Suicide Ideation uses a scale from 0 to 2. All of the Beck assessments, except for the Beck Depression Inventory Fast Screen, have the option for an interpretive report or a progress report. The interpretive report includes examinees' responses to certain demographic questions. The assessment result includes the raw scores, the T-scores, percentile ranks, and diagnostic ranges. So you also get a paragraph of text interpreting the results, and the endorsed items along with the ones that have been answered and selected by the examiner are also provided. The progress report is designed for monitoring an examinee's progress over time and is provided at no additional charge. So it displays the changes in scores in a graph for up to 5 administrations and provides the examinee's raw score for each administration. So Q Global enables you to quickly assess and efficiently organise examinee information, generate scores, and produce accurate, comprehensive reports all via the web. So there's improved accuracy with automated scoring and reporting, convenient access from any device, and is therefore flexible because of its web-based nature, so you can access it anytime, anywhere. There's one source for managing and retrieving all patients' assessment information. It's time-saving using the remote administration, and it allows you to monitor the progress easily. And a final thing to add is that all of the Beck assessments, except for the Beck Depression Inventory Fast Screen, have been standardised to use online as well as the paper versions. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email me at abby.pick@pearson.com. Thank you.